I think when people are starting off shooting black and white film, there's a bit of confusion about filters that you might use for black and white photography. Now, I'm not talking about protective filters or polarizing filters. I'm talking about colored filters that you put on your taking lens, and it alters the contrast and darkness of your subject. So I think there's a bit of confusion. I don't know everything about it, but let me explain my understanding of it anyways. So these are the 4 filters that I use the most. Now mine are B+W, which is a brand, and you don't have to buy that brand. There's a lot of great brands. There's probably better brands than B+W, but I doubt it. But anyways, they're a premium brand, and the advantage of using the same brand is just the consistency as you switch filter sizes between lenses that have different filter size threads. It just maintains all of the consistency. So I use B+W, but any brand will do. And of the 4 filters I use, I want to discard one right away. So this is an 092, which is really, it looks black. It's actually deep red, really, really dark red. And it's for infrared photography. So if you're using infrared film, you use this filter. Now with an SLR, you can't even see the subject through the lens. It's so dark. But with a rangefinder, like if you put it on a rangefinder, the taking lens is so dark, but you're looking through the rangefinder window and it's easy to compose and focus. So I use, when I shoot infrared, I tend to do it with a rangefinder, and I use this 092 filter. But beyond that, that's kind of the subject for another day, infrared. So I'm going to put this one aside. Now the 3 most common filters that I use are the red, and with B+W this is called an 090, and then the orange is an 040, and then the yellow is 022. Now this one looks orange. Technically it's dark yellow, but it looks orange to me, so let's call it orange. Now, I use these 3 filters. I have them in different sizes for different lenses, but there's a great advantage if you use the same filter size throughout your system. So Nikon tends to use a 52 filter size if you're using kind of like the old manual focus prime lenses for black and white film. Now, with digital, I don't know what these filters do. I mean, I worked for Sony for 14 years in the imaging group. I was a national manager for Sony North America. And we didn't tend to use colored filters. Even if you converted to black and white, you probably didn't use a filter. And in some areas, in some softwares, you can actually put the filter effect from different colored filters on in software later on. Anyways, I'm talking about film photography. So everything here is about film photography. Now, when I took the pictures that I'm going to be talking about, I used a 135 2.8 lens on an SLR. And the film was Pan F. So Pan F is a 50 ISO Ilford product, fine grain, great detail. Certainly if you're going to be doing studio still life, it's a great choice. Now what are you going to photograph? Well, there's a lot of things to photograph, but still lifes are always fun. You know, on a rainy day or a winter day, it's always great to do some still lifes. And one thing that has been photographed a lot by a lot of different people are peppers. So this is my experience with peppers, and I'll show you some examples of other people's experiences as well. Now, the best place to buy peppers is at the farmer's market. You can go to a good market. You can go to, like, downtown Toronto has a great market, you know, Atwater Market in Montreal. Those are great markets, but you're not going to get the right peppers there. You're going to get perfect peppers. These markets are premium deluxe markets. They're like the $9 strawberry kind of market. That's not what you want. You want the mutant, freaky, ugly farmer's market where some of the peppers are perfect and some of them are just ugly freaks, mutants. You know what I mean? So the more mutant the pepper, the better off you are, I think. It's just more interesting to photograph. No one wants to see your photo of a perfect pepper. And the fresher you can get it and get it photographed, the better off you are. They tend to look old very quickly in black and white photos. They kind of lose their shine in that. So they age quickly. So get it, shoot it, eat it, move on. Now, there's a great famous photo of a pepper, Edward Weston Pepper number 30. Now, he shot a lot of peppers. Pepper number 30 wasn't his last attempt, or obviously his first attempt. And apparently he had some great looking mutant peppers that the kids ate before he got a chance to photograph them. So that's good and bad. But anyways, that's the great thing with shooting vegetables, is that you can always eat it afterwards. Now, Edward Weston. If you don't know who Edward Weston is, you should probably stop watching my video and go and Google him and see some of his work. And if you do want to see one of his photographs, I know the George Eastman House, which is a museum in Rochester. Eastman was Kodak, right? That was his last name, the guy who designed and owned the Kodak company. So the Eastman Museum has a great collection of photographs, and they have the Edward Weston Pepper. Now, it might not be on display, it probably won't be. You might want to call ahead and say, hey, I'm going to be at the museum, the gallery. Can I see one of the Edward Weston Peppers that you have? And I think if you're nice enough, they'll bring it out for you and you'll be able to hold it if you prearrange it. I don't know if you just show up what's going to happen. Anyways, the Edward Weston Pepper, very famous. Now, if you wanted to buy an Edward Weston Pepper, they are available commercially, originals signed by the author type, heritage photos. These were shot maybe 100 years ago. That's when he was working, and that's kind of when the Pepper era was. Anyways, they're about $12,000 if you want to buy an original. Now, that's too steep for me, but hey, maybe you'll find that it's right in your wheelhouse and you'll want to get your own Pepper. Now, when Edward Weston shot his Pepper, he was shooting on 8x10 film, 8x10 wooden camera, and making contact prints. And the film was not like the modern films of now. The ISO, which was called ASA back then, the ISO was very slow. And he took this photo of a pepper. Apparently, he took the pepper, put it in a giant metal funnel, like the kind of funnel that you would pour gasoline into a tractor. Used this funnel, put the pepper in it, and sat it outside, and the sun kind of moved across. And it was out there 48 hours was the length of the exposure, just to get enough image on the film, because the film was slow, and maybe it wasn't in the sun. I don't know. Did he use a filter? I don't know. I wasn't there. What color was the pepper? I don't know. It does make a difference, but I don't actually know. It doesn't seem to say anywhere what color the pepper was. But the peppers that I shot were red. You can get them red, yellow, green. I think that's it. Anyways, maybe try yellow next time, but I shot with red. And the stem on the pepper is green. So I've got red and green, and I put it on a blue background. So I've kind of got some primary colors here, and you'll be able to see the effect of the filters on this red pepper with the green stem on the blue background. Now, are you going to shoot this on 8x10 like Edward Weston? It's a good idea if you have an 8x10. The advantage of shooting at large format with a still life is you set this whole thing up, you shoot a couple of frames, and you don't have to finish the roll. You can process 2 frames or 4 frames, whatever you've shot. Maybe you process and take a look at them and you say, oh, it's underexposed or overexposed, or it's this or that, and you do a couple more shots right away before you eat the pepper. So if I had one and I no longer have a large format camera, I would shoot this on large format. What I shot it with, and I'm not saying it's a good idea, I shot it with a 35mm, again, Ilford Pan F film with a 135 2.8 lens. Is that the perfect combo? No, that's not the perfect combo at all. The 135 doesn't focus enough to make the pepper large enough through the image size. So all of the pictures I'm showing you were cropped a bit in the darkroom because the peppers weren't really large enough. Now, what would be a better choice? A better choice would be to use either the 135 with extension tubes. So those are physical tubes that they fit between the lens and the camera. They allow you to focus a little bit closer. A little bit would be all you would need, but maybe extension tubes, or better yet, a perfect lens is the 105 macro. I think Nikon calls it a micro. They've always done that for some strange reason. But the 135 with extension tubes or the 105 macro would be the perfect choice if you're going to do it on 35mm, which I don't suggest. I suggest you do it on large format. And if you don't have large format, why don't you just shoot on the Hasselblad with like the 120 macro? That would be perfect as well. Pan F film, so nice slow film on a tripod. Let's get sharp pictures. Now, as I said, there's 3 areas to watch. You've got the red pepper, the green stem, and the blue background. It'll change with each of the filters. Now, the meter reading was through the camera with the Nikon SLR. Now this camera, as I've mentioned many times, has a very simplistic meter. It's center weighed, so I actually put a gray card right in front of the Pepper, took the meter reading off of that, and when I added a filter, I just did it right through the camera as well. Now the more modern cameras, maybe you're going to do this on digital or you're going to use a more modern SLR like the F5 or the F6, they have matrix metering, which is way more sophisticated, way more accurate. But I used a gray card just so I could get the exposure very consistent. And the exposure was consistent, which helps you down the road in the darkroom. So as I said, the metering was done right off the gray card. Now you can meter through the filter off the gray card and get an accurate exposure, or you can just meter without a filter and then add the filter factor. So that's how much light this is absorbing. So the yellow is absorbing 1 stop of light. So if you were shooting at 1 second, the correct exposure is now 2 seconds. The 040 orange filter, 2 stops. So 1 second, now 4 seconds. The red is 3 stops. So at 1 second, if that was our correct exposure, we're now at 8 seconds. So for the f-stop, I used about f16. You could use f11, f16, f22, something in there. Again, we're at the minimal focus for the lens, so you do want as much depth of field as you can get. Now this lens goes to f32. I don't shoot at f32. You've got diffraction. Diffraction is an unsharpness that creeps into your photos at that super small aperture. So even though your depth of field is greater, your actual sharpness is not greater. So why not just shoot at f11 or f16, something like that? That'll work out perfect. Now when you're getting your meter reading, you also kind of want to pay attention a little bit to the shutter speed. So the camera is sharper at different shutter speeds, even though you're on a tripod, even though you're holding it steady. So when you fire the camera, the mirror flaps and the shutter mechanism opens. Both of those cause some vibration. Now on the camera that I have, I can pre-fire the mirror or lock it up. So now I don't have that mirror movement, but I still have the shutter movement. So if you're shooting at an 1/8 of a second as an example, there's a minute microscopic amount of shutter movement when you fire the shutter. Now at an 1/8 of a second, it might be a serious part of the exposure. So if you were to shoot at an 1/8 of a second, it might not be as sharp as 8 seconds, because at 8 seconds you've got that micro movement of the shutter, but on an 8-second exposure it'd be an irrelevant amount. So 4 seconds might be sharper than 1/4 of a second is really what I'm saying. You're going to lock the mirror up. You're going to use either the self timer or a cable release, but I would stay away from that kind of like 1/2 second, 1/4 second, 1/8 of a second, and I would go something longer, like if you could do 4 seconds. I think that's probably perfect. Any movement, anything is negligible at that point. So I'm on a tripod. I've got the mirror locked up after I focused. I've stopped down to say f16, and I'm doing about a 2-second, 4-second exposure, something like that. And as you can see in this picture of my little scene here, we've got the blue background. It's just the paper background, and wasn't the perfect choice. Then I've got the red pepper. That was a good choice. And it's got there's that little bit of green stem on there as well. So again, I'm going to shoot the photos with the yellow filter, the orange filter, and the red filter. Now this is what it looks like with no filter. So you get an idea of what it looks like with no filter. And these are slightly cropped. I moved the enlarger up and I kind of left it there, just because the image wasn't that massive on the negative frame. Now you might like the picture with no filter. So the pepper is darker than the background. Again, the background's blue, the pepper's red. The pepper is darker than the background. So in your mind, you have to kind of think, what is it that I like? Do I want the pepper on a light background, or do I want a lighter pepper on a darker background? You kind of have to decide. So with no filter, the pepper is darker than the background. Now, if I add a filter, let's say we're going to add the yellow filter, I'm going to lose 1 stop of light, so I have to double my exposure. Now, 2 things happen. The blue background goes darker, and the red pepper goes lighter. So now I've lightened the pepper a bit and darkened the background a bit. Now, maybe they're too similar. Maybe there's not enough sort of separation between the pepper the red pepper, the blue background. So is a yellow filter perfect? It all depends what you like. But I've lightened the pepper and I've darkened the background with the yellow. Now, what happens when we add the orange? So now we lose another stop of exposure. So instead of being 2 seconds, I'm now 4 seconds. Now I'm 8 seconds with the orange, right? 2 stops. And what happens is that the pepper becomes lighter and the blue background becomes darker. Now, why is this so important? And why do I use an orange filter so much? Well, it's because of the blue. Now, in my example here, I'm using blue, but I take a lot of pictures that have blue in them. The sky is blue. So if you're taking a photograph, maybe you're doing a beautiful landscape shot, and you've got a beautiful blue sky, it doesn't come out blue in your photo. It comes out, in the final print, it comes out white. And if you have beautiful fluffy white clouds, well, it's white on white, so you can't even see them. So the filter doesn't affect the clouds because they're white, but it affects the blue of the sky. So if I use an orange filter when I've got the sky in the photo, it will go darker. It will also go darker with a yellow, but not to the same extent. And it will go even darker with a red. So if you've got sky in the photo and you want to darken the tone of the sky, you're going to need to use a filter. Maybe the yellow, maybe the orange, maybe the red. Now, for the people that watch my channel, basically there's 2 groups. There's those that know more than me and those that know less than me. I guess that's true of everybody. Anyways, so if you know more than I do, fantastic. Maybe there'll be a couple of tips here. If you're just starting your journey in black and white film, maybe some of these filter ideas will be useful as we talk about peppers, but we also talk about the sky. So the key to remember is yellow lightens yellow in the photo and darkens the opposite. Orange does it to a greater extent, and then red does it to a great extent. So yellow filter, the pepper has been lightened. The background is slightly darker, but they're too similar. Orange, the pepper is lighter yet. The background is darker yet. So now I'm starting to get the lighter pepper on the dark background. Red, the pepper is almost white. You could print it white for sure, but the pepper is almost white and the background is almost black. So if you like a really light pepper on a darker background, this is the combination to go with. So subtle changes, medium changes, greater changes. And that's what you get with a landscape as well. With a yellow filter, the sky will darken a bit. With an orange filter, it will darken more. And with a red filter, it will darken almost to black. And you kind of see in those Ansel Adams photos where the sky is black, maybe they were using a red filter. But the thing to remember is those were different films and they reacted to the light differently. That's one thing. And another weird thing is at altitude, the greater the altitude, the greater the filter effect. So at sea level, the orange filter will darken the sky to a certain extent, but in the mountains, it will go darker yet. So that's just something to remember. And Ansel Adams shots with those black skies were in the mountains. Now, as I said, some people are just starting off and some people know more than I do. So if you're just starting off, of these 3, I'm going to tell you the orange is the most useful. This is the one I use the most. But if you're only buying one, buy the yellow. Start off with the yellow and see a slight effect. Now people think, oh, I need to see like a huge effect. And they go with the red. I never use the red. I rarely use the red. The red is not that useful. So here's the problem with the red. So if you think of your picture, let's say you're doing a picture of an old barn and part of it's in shadow and part of it's in direct sunlight. So now you put a red filter on. You're going to darken the sky, but the shadow side of the barn is lit by the blue sky. Right? We got the front of the barn with the full sun on it. That light is bright and kind of 5,000 Kelvin, right? Bright light. But the shadow side of the barn is just lit by blue sky. That makes sense. There's no sun shining on it. It's just lit by the blue sky. But the red filter is darkening all the blue. So the barn that's lit by the blue sky goes darker than you're expecting. In fact, those barn boards, instead of having detail in the shadows, they almost go black with no detail because they're lit by the blue light of the open sky. So with a red filter, I find the effect too much. It's great on the front where the full sun is on the barn, but on the side where it's lit by the blue sky, it goes detailless. Hollow shadows, no real detail, no wood grain, can't get it back, it's gone. So that's what I don't like about the red. The effect is too great, and it really darkens, becomes detailless in the shadows. So the red is interesting. People want to start with it. I don't recommend it to start off with. I recommend the yellow, even though I use the orange the most. If you're going to buy two, buy these two, but start with the yellow if you haven't done it, much before. Now, if you're shooting all the time with filters, maybe you disagree with me about the red, or maybe you use red, or maybe it's working for you. Everyone's mileage may vary. But if you've been shooting for years, I have found that the open shadow areas just go too dark. What is your experience? Just leave it in the comments below. You're exposing and having exposure compensation because of the red filter, but I still find that the blue goes just a little bit too dark, the blue light. So back to my pepper shot. With the different filters, what I have found, if you look at the stem area, so the stem was green, and as you know, we've got an example of it in full color here, the stem's a little bit green. Now, I found with the red filter, the stem goes too dark. I don't want the stem to stick out that much. The pepper's gone white, the stem's gone dark. It's a little bit kind of a weird contrast there. So that's another reason to like the orange more. Of the pepper shots, I tended to like the orange the most. Interesting with the red, but the pepper's too light and the stem is too dark. So from the first group of pictures, I like the orange the best. Now, as I've changed the peppers around, I've got this pepper number 2, and I think it's a little bit too dark. Similar though to the other one, same kind of idea. It goes lighter. It's lighter than the background as I go with the yellow filter. And the red filter, it's maybe too light. It's interesting, but it's too light, and the stem is again too dark. When we look at pepper number 3 with the yellow filter, very similar in tones, but I do like how the stem looks on this one. Now, pepper number 4 with the orange filter. I've turned the pepper slightly between the filters, and of the two shots, I actually like the earlier one, which where the fingers of the pepper, so to say, are overlapping slightly. It's a very subtle difference, but when you look at the two prints side by side, you think, oh, I kind of like it that way better. So that pepper number 4 is certainly one of my favorite ones with the orange filter. Again, the red filter, the pepper's just gone too light. It's a nice composition. It would work great if you didn't have the orange, but since I've got the orange, maybe I'll go with that. Pepper number 5. Now this is a different pepper, but it's still a red pepper. This would make a nice print too. You could go with this with pepper number 5 with the orange filter. See how fast I'm going through this? I'm already on pepper number 5. No wonder he only was in like pepper number 30. You get there right away. One bag of peppers and you're halfway there. Okay, so pepper number 5 with the red filter. Again, the pepper becomes too light. The stem is too dark. It would be a great backup if you didn't have the orange, but since I have the orange, it's my second favorite composition. Now, in conclusion, what would I do different? Well, there's things I would do different. Your mileage may vary, but things I would do different. First thing, I'd like to try this with a yellow pepper. You would have less effect. Maybe a yellow pepper would be the answer. So these were red mutant peppers. I think that's the term for them, right? When you go to the market, isn't that what you ask for? Red mutant peppers? Yeah, probably. Anyways, maybe I would get a yellow pepper next time. Maybe I haven't tried the green. I don't know what green would be like, but I'd probably go with a yellow next time. If I could get it, I'd shoot with a macro lens on the SLR instead of the 135-2.8. I did also shoot with the 85 a couple of frames, but the 85, the minimal focus, it's closer than the 135, but the image size was actually smaller. So the 135 let me get a little bit bigger image size. Even though the 85 focused closer. But if I did it again, maybe I would buy a cheap off eBay extension tube for Nikon. I'm sure they're super cheap now that they've switched to the mirrorless mount. And maybe get an extension tube or shoot the thing on a Hasselblad, with a 120 macro. That would be great. That'd be probably as good as you need. Yeah, it'd be fun to do it on 8x10, but how are you going to print that? So, here's my conclusions. There it is. Go buy some peppers. Peppers are a great thing. Still lifes are a great thing. You go out, it's a rainy, ugly day. You pick up some vegetables. You're going to eat them later during the hockey game. You pick up some vegetables, you photograph them. There's all sorts of great, mutant peppers out there, onions. Edward Weston has a great picture of a cabbage. It looks really good. You could actually print these up nice and put them in the kitchen. That'd be a good spot to put them if you had some nice garlic, maybe some macro shots. If you've got a macro lens, you could move in on some nice garlic with that papery, transparent kind of texture to it. That'd be good. And put that right next to your peppers. Wow, it's just a smorgasbord of great still life photos. Gives you something to shoot when there's nothing to shoot. Try the filters. The only way to learn is to try them out. I'd start with the yellow. The B+W is called the O22, but my favorite one is the O40. Now, people sometimes buy filters larger than their lens filter size and use step up, step down rings. That's a good solution. For me, I use filters so much, I just have them in the sizes that I need. But get one, get two, try them out, experiment, see what works for you. Have fun. It's all about having fun. And then when you're all done, you make these great, magnificent prints, just like Edward Weston did. Then you eat the peppers. It's beautiful. It's perfect. Just saying.